You know, there's something deeply disturbing about how the British establishment continues to twist reality when it comes to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Every time the stench of scandal rises from Prince Andrew's side of the royal moat, somehow the palace and their media mouthpieces decide to shovel dirt toward the Duke and Duchess of Sussex instead. And once again, we're seeing that ugly pattern rear its head. The Times of London just ran a story that perfectly captures the rotten core of what the British monarchy has become. It's a story that tries to dress up disgrace as diplomacy. A story that exposes the warped moral compass of the firm. Let's call it what it is, a full-blown crisis of hypocrisy. Because according to palace insiders, Prince Harry, the man who built the Invictus Games, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan, who walked away from royal privilege to protect his wife and children, is now being described as a greater priority for punishment than Prince Andrew, the man who exchanged friendly emails with Jeffrey Epstein and lived in a world of denial and cover-ups. Let that sink in for a moment. The palace thinks Harry is a bigger problem than Andrew. This isn't about accountability, it's about obsession. Every time Prince Andrew's name crawls back into the headlines, especially when new evidence of his contact with Epstein surfaces, the palace PR machine starts spinning like a tornado. And what's their favourite distraction tactic? You guessed it, attacking Meghan and Harry. It's almost like a reflex. Prince Andrew's scandal flares up. Leak another exclusive about Harry's security. A new email surfaces showing Andrew's continued friendship with Epstein. Suddenly, the tabloids are screaming about Meghan's ambition or Hollywood lifestyle. And the British media, ever the willing accomplices, play their role like a chorus of vultures. But the real story here, Royal Sussex Squad family, is how blatantly the palace continues to protect a man linked to one of the most infamous predators in modern history, while waging a years-long smear campaign against a veteran and his biracial wife for daring to live independently. It's the same tired hypocrisy we've seen for years. Look at how they bend over backwards to call Andrew's crimes and associations embarrassments or unfortunate situations, while describing Harry and Meghan's freedom as a crisis. Look at how they claim Andrew has been punished enough, but still let him live at Royal Lodge, surrounded by luxury, clinging to titles and protected from scrutiny. Meanwhile, the palace strips Harry of his military honours, the same honours he earned in combat, and refuses him basic security when he steps foot in the country of his birth. The man who risked his life for Britain can't even safely bring his wife and children home. And yet they say he is the greater priority. The British public should be furious, not at Harry, but at the corruption that protects the powerful and punishes the principled. And let's talk about this so-called Harry problem. The Times piece quotes palace insiders describing him as the second Duke of Hazzard. You can practically hear the sneer in that phrase, as if choosing peace, protecting your family, and living a purpose-driven life makes you dangerous. But to them it does. Because Harry represents what the monarchy fears most: independence, empathy, and truth. While Prince Andrew hides behind his mother's legacy and his brother's silence, Harry has stood in the open, spoken about mental health, trauma, racism, and the toxic tabloid system that destroyed his mother's peace. And that, my friends, is what they can't forgive. Because Harry and Meghan didn't just step back, they stepped out, and in doing so, they expose how much of the British monarchy's public image is built on spin and scapegoating. Now, let's look at this email. February 2011. Andrew writes to Epstein, "Don't worry about me. It would seem we are in this together. Together." And yet, somehow, the same institution that saw fit to strip Harry of security for speaking the truth refuses to strip Andrew of his dukedom or even his taxpayer-subsidised home. They say taking his title would require parliamentary action. As if that's an excuse. But they sure didn't need an Act of Parliament to leak Meghan's private letters to her father or to fuel years of racist dog whistles in the press. Where was all that legal caution when Meghan was being hunted by paparazzi or when palace staffers were accidentally feeding lies to tabloids? The hypocrisy is staggering. And while Camilla reportedly frets about how Andrew's holes in his story might damage the monarchy's image, she and her media allies are only too happy to amplify falsehoods about the Sussexes to divert attention. Because, let's be honest, if the British public really focused on the palace's choices, they'd see exactly who's being protected and who's being persecuted. Andrew's punishment has been a downgrade in luxury. Poor him, his allowance was cut, but he still lives in a mansion. Meanwhile, Meghan was driven out of the country by racist abuse and institutional gaslighting, and Harry was branded a traitor for defending her. They say Andrew's life is punishment enough. Really? Then what do they call the daily tabloid torture that Meghan and Harry have endured for 6 straight years? What do they call the relentless character assassinations, the endless headlines questioning their parenting, their marriage, their motives, all to distract from the rotting stench of Andrew's scandal and the palace's moral bankruptcy? Every leak, every source close to the king, every ridiculous Harry problem headline is nothing more than a PR smoke screen designed to keep the public's eyes off the real issue. A monarchy that protects the compromised while punishing the courageous. And make no mistake, this Harry problem isn't a royal issue. It's a power issue. Because Harry and Meghan have what the royals can't manufacture: authenticity. Their projects, their philanthropy, their global popularity. None of it is rooted in taxpayer money or palace manipulation. It's earned. From the Invictus Games to Meghan's entrepreneurial success with her brand American Riviera Orchard, they've built something real. And that's what terrifies the palace. Every success they achieve outside the royal bubble exposes how irrelevant that old institution has become. Meanwhile, Andrew's continued protection shows that the monarchy's so-called values are nothing more than selective morality. Convenient when needed, discarded when inconvenient. The British establishment wants you to believe that Harry is a threat because he asked for accountability. But the truth is, Harry's independence threatens their illusion of control. He's not the Duke of Hazard, he's the Duke of Integrity. And as long as Harry and Meghan continue to thrive, continue to speak truth to power, and continue to live freely, the monarchy will keep projecting their failures onto them. Because the moment they admit that the real scandal isn't in Montecito, but in Windsor, the whole rotten system begins to crumble. The palace can keep pretending that protecting Andrew is about family loyalty, but everyone can see it for what it is: damage control for the indefensible. And if they truly believe that punishing Harry is a priority, then that tells you everything about their priorities: power over principle, image over justice, silence over truth. But here's the beautiful thing: truth always wins. Harry and Meghan's story has outlasted every smear, every lie, every tabloid attack. Their influence stretches far beyond the palace gates, and their light keeps shining, brighter, bolder, unstoppable. And as we've seen time and again, every attempt to drag them down only elevates them higher. because integrity has a funny way of surviving even the dirtiest propaganda. So, while the palace clings to its scandals and courtiers whisper about the Harry problem, the real world sees the truth. The problem isn't Harry. It's the hypocrisy that fears him. And to those who think history won't remember this moment, think again. Because one day, when the dust settles and the monarchy faces the weight of its own contradictions, people will remember who stood for truth and who hid behind power. And they'll remember that a son who chose love over privilege and a woman who refused to be silenced represented the future, while the palace clung to the sins of the past. Because no matter how many stories they plant, no matter how many attacks they fund, Harry and Meghan have already won something the monarchy can't buy: moral clarity and the world's respect. So, Royal Sussex Squad, let's keep calling it out. Let's keep shining that light where the British press refuses to look. And let's keep standing with Harry and Meghan, because every day they prove that dignity, compassion and truth will always outshine scandal and spin. Outro, Royal Sussex Squad style. And that's where we'll leave it for now, Squad. Another day, another example of how the palace protects its own, unless your name happens to be Harry or Meghan. But as we've seen, the Sussexes don't need their approval. They've got something far stronger: the love and respect of people who see the truth. The palace thinks Prince Harry is a greater priority than punishing Prince Andrew since 2019. Whenever there are particularly awful stories about Prince Andrew in the news, the British press and the palace all deflect to attacking the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. That's one of the reasons why the British press has been churning through so many negative and false stories about the Sussexes this month. Andrew and Fergie have been in the news for their lies about cutting off contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Last weekend, we learned that Andrew sent this message to Epstein in February 2011. "I'm just as concerned for you. Don't worry about me. It would seem we are in this together and will have to rise above it. Otherwise, keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon." This has not only inspired another round of palace-sanctioned Sussex attacks, it's inspired another round of palace dithering about what to do about Andrew. Palace sources swear up and down that they've punished Andrew thoroughly, and there's nothing else they can take away from him. Well, the Times of London has a lengthy piece in which palace sources are still dithering and throwing out ideas for what they could possibly do about Andrew. Buried in the piece is a bizarre mention of Prince Harry. That's being done on purpose, to act as if Harry and Andrew are equal. Some highlights. Andrew's 2011 email to Epstein. For the palace, there is no mistaking the fact that the email represents a seismic shift, one which moves the dial from Andrew's long-held position of deniability, however implausible, to apparent evidence of a lie. Because it proves that, contrary to his previous protestations, he was still in touch with Epstein after he apparently broke off their friendship. Without action, doesn't the palace risk being seen to simply grin and bear it? "We're certainly not grinning, and we're not bearing it," says a palace source. "We're taking the fundamental issues extremely seriously. It is very much not the case that the palace is turning a blind eye or a deaf ear to it all. We are taking every fresh allegation extremely seriously and reviewing the potential options for further censure, while being aware that significant steps that can be taken have largely been enacted." Camilla is worried. The palace source added, "It is a source of immense frustration and concern that there continue to be holes picked in the Duke's story. and there is understandable anxiety that it will impact on the royal family's wider reputation and public work, not least, of course, the Queen's notable leadership in campaigning against all forms of sexual abuse. Andrew's titles, so what's to be done? Today, Andrew retains his title of Duke of York and that of Prince. Both are difficult to remove, given that to do so would require intervention from Parliament. Some commentators have described it as a real crisis for the monarchy, while for others it merely confirms their already rock-bottom opinion of the Duke. A YouGov poll over the summer, before the latest revelations, showed that 67% of the public would back the idea of removing Andrew's dukedom. While it has been done before, notably in the First World War, to sanction titled aristocrats fighting for the German army, extinguishing a dukedom would require a legal mechanism. And even if you did strip Andrew of being a duke, notes a well-placed source, he'd still be known as a prince, which sounds better anyway. Councillor of State. Yet Andrew does still hold one constitutional role, that of Councillor of State. These are members of the royal family who might be called upon to deputise for the king if he is overseas or unwell by carrying out his official duties. 2 are required to act in consort in the monarch's absence. Typically, these are the monarch's consort and the next 4 in line to the throne over the age of 21. That includes the Queen, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Sussex, Andrew and Princess Beatrice. In a sense, the opportunity was missed in the 2022 amendment to remove the Duke of York, says Craig Prescott, a constitutional law specialist. What they did instead was, to all intents and purposes, make it a legal dead letter by saying that he and Harry would never be called upon to act. Andrew's money. A source said, for Andrew, the punishment seems to be the life he's living, as he has had everything apart from Royal Lodge taken away from him. Even the money. Andrew's private allowance from the King was removed last year when Charles pulled the plug, and he hasn't received any public money since he ceased his official duties 6 years ago. How he's funding his lifestyle at Royal Lodge a year on is said to be a mystery to Charles. Andrew has given verbal assurances to the keeper of the Privy Purse that he can afford the upkeep, but it's unclear quite how. Any suggestion, I'm told, that Andrew still has a treasure trove left over from the last Queen and the Queen Mother is wide of the mark. The Harry problem. There is also the Harry problem, the second Duke of Hazard, as he is known in palace circles. A source said, Harry is a greater priority. The whole thing feels off. Any afterglow from a recent reunion between father and son was quickly scuppered by briefings from Montecito, Harry's new home in California, saying that the men in grey suits at the palace were trying to sabotage his relationship with his father by leaking details of the meeting. Harry has written to the new Home Secretary to ask for a risk assessment as he keeps his battle for UK security alive. In other words, it rumbles on. The Andrew problem is closer to home and more pressing. One source familiar with his situation described him as a narcissist who cleaves to Royal Lodge, the last sign of his royal status. A decision to remain at the 42-room palatial home is, they say, illogical and financially ruinous, as the long-term lease with the Crown estate requires him to maintain upkeep on the property. From the Times. The thing is, I actually agree that the Sussexes are doing more damage to the monarchy than Prince Andrew. As much as palace sources want to make it sound like Andrew and Harry are in similar predicaments, the larger issue is that Andrew is for all intents and purposes a family member in good standing. He's still being protected, coddled and cared for by the institution, and they're bending over backwards to ensure that he's not punished any further. Compare that to how the Sussexes have been treated for merely moving out of the UK, buying a home in California and developing their own above-board income streams. The Sussexit did more damage to the monarchy's image than Andrew has done, and that's because of the palace courtiers and the monarch. Over the past 6 years, there's a stark difference in how Andrew is coddled versus the sadistic punishments doled out to the Sussexes. People can see it for themselves, and the British public should wonder why the palace can't stop tripping over their DKs when it comes to Andrew. So, if you stand with Harry and Meghan, if you're tired of the palace games and media hypocrisy, make sure to hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and if you want to support the channel and keep our message strong, click that super thanks button below. Every bit helps keep independent voices like ours shining through the noise. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and as always, we ride with the Sussexes.